Well, hello and welcome back to the RevOpsCharlie YouTube channel. And today we have another episode of Demo Day, where I have the huge pleasure in speaking to revenue leaders and founders from revenue technology platforms to help give buyers of those types of platforms some unique insight into the challenge that those tools solve, and even a little look inside the platform itself. And today, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Gerry Hill from Connect and Sell. So welcome to the channel, Gerry.
Charlie, good to see you.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming on the channel. And so for those that aren't familiar with yourself and your LinkedIn content or with Connect and Sell, perhaps you'd like to just take a minute or so and just to introduce yourself and your role at Connect and Sell and what the company does for your customers.
Yeah, sure. So, Gerry Hill, I've been actively in B2B sales, either in service subscription or software for coming up to 22 years now. Worn most hats across most types of jobs, and I've been good at some of them and terrible at some of them. But I think I've sort of landed on one light bulb truth, which is all successful selling motions in B2B are driven by conversation somewhere with someone at a human to human level, which is one of the main reasons why I fell in love with Connect and Sell as a customer and now running the business for Europe. So joined 4 years ago, pretty simple proposition, which is cold calling or conversation at the top of the funnel is hard. And it's not hard for the obvious reasons. It's hard for the inobvious reasons, which is simply that your reps are starved of conversations, typically one every 90 minutes in 2023. So we've created a proposition which enables your seller to have a conversation on average every 4.5 minutes with one of those hard to reach, intended and well-researched prospects that you want to start initiating relationships with. And all of the downstream value that creates for individuals, leadership and companies along the way. So I'm trying to bottle that value and share that value across our community.
Mm. Well, thanks very much, and I'm sure we're going to get into some of the detail about the product in a short while. But I thought it'd be helpful just at the start, just for us to have a little discussion about how we're seeing the way that selling happens. And you made a really interesting point there that at its heart, at some point, one human has to speak to another human. And whilst there are increasing stats that millennial buyers want to have a seller-free experience, the reality is, especially in B2B and in enterprise B2B, that at some point, two humans have to speak to each other. What's your experience of that? And are you seeing that it's coming back to more of a human-to-human element?
I don't think the human-to-human bit's ever gone away. I think it's convenient research for the people that make money with research in a lot of instances. And I think, broadly speaking, that research typically speaks to known purchases that are going to happen in the future against a known category that you already buy today. So you might engage in pre-funnel research. Up to 84% of your decision might be made if you're going to move to HubSpot from Salesforce. But what about the unknown problem sets? What about innovation or new products or categories emerging in and around your world? So for my thinking, having worked in both big and small companies and in both established and non-established categories, I need to get out in front of people and make them aware of a problem. I need to make them aware of ways they can solve that problem. I need to help them understand the size of that problem. And I can't do that if somebody's researching for a known problem that occupies their thinking today. So the art of actually getting out and speaking to a stranger about seeing whether or not that problem set exists is a noble endeavor for the 95% of companies across the world that are not market dominant today or exist in those existing categories where people spend their time researching to replace, displace or renew, right? So philosophically, outbound sales will never go away when you have the pace of innovation that we have in 2023.
I think, yeah, when we think of that those stats about buyers wanting a seller-free experience, I keep thinking that they want a bad seller-free experience. What buyers have got access to so much information and education and advice through the internet, through their peer groups, through trusted partners, that what they don't want is then to have to speak to someone that knows less than they do. So as an outbounder, it's just raises the game that what you're educating those buyers on needs to be a much higher level than just, let me tell you about my product and pricing.
Yeah, I mean, here's something that I'm actively listening for in my team's calls at the end of a conversation. Thanks for that. You gave me a lot of food for thought. It's probably one of the highest compliments you can ever give a seller, right?
Mm.
And that stems from having a highly structured, well thought out, peer-to-peer conversation with an equal, and help them reimagine something so that it benefits your perspective, not just a market perspective, right? So that's the skill and the science, both of which are science, by the way. So, yeah.
I was looking at some stats earlier this year in terms of the number of quality conversations that SDRs are having each day. This was some research from Bridge Group in their SDR report that came out earlier this year. Back in 2014, SDRs were having an average of 8 quality conversations a day. And so a quality conversation is not necessarily a move forward. It can also be a qualifying out, but it's a contact with a potential customer that either moved it forwards or qualified it out. So it was 8 in 2014, and it's now down to 3.6, so a halving. Are you recognizing that? Do you see that sellers are finding it more difficult to get in touch with buyers?
Yeah, I think generally speaking it is, but that's because channel saturation is so ubiquitous. My sense is that people are doubling down on a channel because it's a perceived playbook that works. And as with anything, the second something starts working and taking hold and achieves a level of maturity, it stops working. I think the parallel is in financial services, right? If I'm an asset manager or a hedge fund, I get into a trade before anyone else. I maximize my profitability on the trade, but eventually somebody catches the coattails of the trade, and then somebody else catches the coattails of the trade, and at some point the trade runs out of value. I think also one of the other real issues we've got is very non-imaginative sales leadership in 2023 that wholly sits inside of the same literature, so it executes the same stuff. And when you continue to execute the same stuff, well, don't be surprised when the returns start to be self-limiting at a certain point. But there's no real imagination in the business process or the innovation. So you kind of get what you deserve 9 times out of 10.
And so thinking about connect and sell, what is your target ideal customer profile? Who are the organizations and industries that you're selling into mainly?
So I like a wartime CEO. I like somebody that wants to win and wants to win significantly in their market. That's generally an executive that's coming off the back of a mission critical funding event, whether that's their first sort of major Series B onwards, whether they've just been acquired, whether it's just private equity backed. Why? Well, you've promised somebody a number that's not your original set of stakeholders, so the consequences of failure for you are potentially dramatic if you don't achieve sufficiently well. And then I like working with people that are highly conversant on their maths and their labour leakages which exist in their sales force today. If I take an enterprise rep who has to do some prospecting, all in, that rep probably costs me somewhere in the region of 150 grand a year, including MBOs and OTE. For that 2 hours of work where I expect them to be generating pipeline for themselves, they're only having one conversation every 90 minutes. Well, that is a function of their labour rate, which is not producing anywhere near the range of return that I anticipate for the investment that I make. So if I want to juice somebody and ensure that they can have 8 to 12 conversations in that time, I'm doing 2 things. I'm enhancing my enterprise AE's opportunity set and coverage, but I'm also reducing the risk and the cost that's inherent in that labour rate, and I'm not forcing them into bad work or patchy work. I can get visibility and control into that work. So quid pro quo. It's a win-win-win for everyone involved in that approach. I think my real sentiment is a bad customer for Connect and Sell's probably a better story. Somebody that isn't necessarily committed, who's only interested in soft market expansion. It's a sales leader that's desperate to be liked by their team rather than actually instilling high quality seller value, seller behaviors and sales requirements, which, let's be honest, even in the age of quality, more of something's generally better than less of something. But often we let people do less of something because we're allowing them to hold behind an uncomfortable truth, which is a research crutch or a quality measure or something which is really esoteric and hard to define. So, that would be it. And I think about our ICP in characteristic terms rather than firmographic, technographic, because any company in the world could meet some of those characteristics that I just described as a winner. But obvious companies provided with all of the same characteristics, but without that sales leadership commitment to coverage, you're not going to be a good customer.
And so in terms of those individuals and then the teams that they're running, what are the challenges that they're facing in terms of driving outbound calls?
Well, I think they know one thing, which is that if they can get somebody into a conversation, they're reasonably good at holding their attention and getting a commitment or a completion. You might not get a meeting, but you can hold somebody in conversation, establish a footprint of a brand in a one-to-one ad unit. That's how I think about cold calls. I don't think about them as meeting units. I think about them as ad units. And I can curate significantly high-quality follow-up that shortens my email cycle and shortens my time to response in email, and it enables me to call somebody back again in the future. That's a really good team of people that you want to be working with, because they understand that a conversation has multiple routes to value for you. And then the problem set that they're facing is they're probably sitting somewhere in a 1 to 4% connect rate. And they're really frustrated every single day when they get feedback from their sellers going, you know what, I don't think that this is a good use of our time. I can just send some more emails because guess what? I'm spending my entire 90 minutes to 2 hours of this call block playing $5 an hour phone operator. I'm managing a phone tree or an IVR or a dial by name directory. I'm speaking to executive assistants. I'm not speaking to that CTO or CISO or security analyst or whomsoever it is I need to be speaking to. I'm just consuming call center work. And that's not a place where we want our B2B SaaS and services sellers to be. Right? So if we can move that problem set away and help people who've got an understanding of how valuable a conversation can be, regardless of how unstructured that conversation might be, then really good spot to be in.
Let's just dive into that a little bit more. You mentioned some of the challenges there for an individual seller. So I've got a 90-minute call block, for example. I want to get through, 50 dials. What are you seeing in terms of these main blockers that are slowing people down from getting to speaking to individuals?
It was a bit of a history lesson, right? When I started my career, I probably had executive assistants that I could engage that would either leave a message or return a message. And the only other form of waste that I really had to manage was voicemail, but it wasn't so ubiquitous that I wouldn't be able to leave a message or get a message returned. From about 2006 onwards, you started to see the rise of an ever-increasing army of invisible forces behind a phone number. So a switchboard operator, a phone tree, which is by far the worst, an IVR, which is for sales, press 1, for marketing, press 2, for accounting, press 3. Then you've got the dreaded doom loop, which, if anybody who ever tried to sell into Google in the mid-2000s knew about, which was this perpetual 20-minute loop where you could be rerouted back to reception. Now, each and every single one of those layers of navigation by your sales rep probably takes somewhere in the order of 1 minute 36 to manage and operate. So let's think about this. It's never the dial, which is the inherent problem that you're trying to solve. It's the unpredictable nature of what happens after the dial. Now, a lot of the talking heads in the world, they're going to go and say, well, just buy more mobile phone numbers, buy more direct dial. But if you go and explore the quantum of all of the curated data sets that you can buy from today, my best bet is that you'd probably be able to get anywhere between 16 to 20% of your total addressable market in the form of mobile or direct dial numbers. Now, if you're a fiduciary of your company and you're a responsible sales leader, who on planet Earth would say a responsible strategy is let's just approach 18% of our market? So then you're back at the square root of the problem set, which is, well, I've still got 88% of my market plus to attempt in the form of conversations, which means that I still need to have a human attending this IVR phone tree switchboard executive assistant loop. And most reps today simply don't want to be doing that work because it's not regarded as valuable. So essentially, my product compresses away all of that work to a low-cost resource that takes ownership of those dials, and it just ensures that your reps don't have to manage that. But typically, because of the nature of that work, it's the soul-destroying, wasteful, and $5 an hour operator work that we just don't engage in.
And to help me understand, so on the website, it says we are not an auto dialer. So could you help just explain what is an auto dialer and the different flavors that, and then how what you're doing, I think, with a sort of software and services element is different to that?
So it's a first principles problem set, right? Like, who are our first principle thinkers in the world today? I'm going to pick on Elon Musk as is the obvious one, but he fundamentally goes away and understands the nature of the problems that he's trying to solve for. And I think he recognizes that Tesla can't operate exclusively as a car OEM. It needs to have infrastructure, it needs to have software, it needs to have all of these other components attached to make it a sensible, scalable proposition to a problem set which we face in the world today. Going back to the fundamental nature of phone numbers, no matter what I look at on a list, I've got no way of predicting what the outcome's going to be. Now, a dialer is just simply going to power activity, but it isn't going to correlate to more conversations because it doesn't understand what's happening behind the dial. So it's just going to run you into waste as fast, or it's going to throw out anything that doesn't look like a direct dial or a mobile phone number, which is turning a massive bug into a feature. It's relying heavily on automation, and it's also at the edge of compliance with most major telephony regulations because there's no real intent or commitment for a human to be driving that dial. So, I'm potentially putting my go-to-market at risk from fines and other forms of punitive measures. So Connect and Sell's understanding of the problem set is such that, we want to be able to do two things at once. We want to be able to power up and create the forcing function that a dialer can give you, which is going to give you volume and velocity and breadth to your activity set. But it's going to correlate to an equivalent growth in the number of conversations because we use a combination of software, which the salesperson interacts with, integrates a CRM, manage the telephony and all the settings and infrastructure. But we've also got this liquid pool of human labor that sits in and around our technology and basically takes ownership of the dials that the system makes for the seller. Now, we make 3 to 6 dials in parallel, which is the force multiplier effect, acts as a hedge or an insurance policy against the very glitchy and low connect rates that we see in the world and the unpredictable nature of the dial. Now, if we just let a rep sit in a parallel dialer, they're still going to have to manage an awful lot of the parts of the job that they found frustrating. So by accompanying this huge liquid pool of very skillful and low-cost human labor into our system, they take ownership of the dial. They see the dial to the natural conclusion and only ever transfer the conversation when somebody's picked up the phone and confirmed their name. But most importantly, hardly ever speaks to the intended prospect. So it's a perfectly natural call for the prospect, the seller, and that human navigation component just acts as a screening and confirmation vehicle up to and including executive assistants and other system operators on the human side. But actually, most of their time spent in an IVR, a phone tree, or a dial by name directory, then baked into the software is a degree of automation and AI, which is able to sniff out phone numbers that pick up directly and prioritize those phone numbers. So you've got these 3 tributaries leading to greater precision, meaning that most customers are Connect and Sell are getting transferred at a rate of 99.9% accuracy to the person that's named on the list, which is the most valuable thing that you can be doing as a seller, is just speaking to that intended prospect. Where it does unsettle a lot of modern sellers is the fact that, I've actually got no way of knowing who that next person I'm going to connect to is, which means that you have to kind of align in with a superior one-to-many message or a first 30-second conversation starter. And then you can have the liquid, natural conversation that you'd need to have beyond that. So you can't really over-research a specific prospect when you use something like Connect and Sell. So there's always a trade-off. I want to get coverage, I want to go fast, and I want to have high quality. You're probably going to have to pull a lever somewhere that sort of allows you to compromise and meet in the middle. And that's typically the other piece of our business, which we talk about, which is the services. We call it the pit crew, and they're staffing for resource and help and advisory around list management, data sourcing and data strategies, talk track structures and messaging, and then lastly, cold call coaching embedded into the team. So we can pretty much service that very high velocity vehicle which sits in the middle of it as a result.
Yeah. So just so that I can understand, so there are a team of sort of live human agents, and they're sitting on the back of your platform, and as the dialer makes these calls, where a call hits an IVR, it says press 1 for sales, for example, they're actually hitting 1 and then helping to get, or adding in the extension, whatever it might be, to try and get to that person.
As of 2023, and our R&D efforts are proving this out all the time, there's still no AI in the world which can do that over a phone line. So the human component is increasingly important for that total market coverage model.
Yeah.
And the way I think about it is, I spoke to a CRO at a very well-known cybersecurity vendor at the beginning of last year. And he said to me, Gerry, if we'd relied exclusively on a mobile-only strategy, we would have missed out on 12,000 meetings last year. So that kind of shows the scale of the problem for a lot of people, who can afford to miss.
Do you have a feeling for what percentage of calls then have to rely on a human agent to handle the IVRs?
We reckon it's of the connected calls that we made last year, which is probably somewhere in the region of close to 3.5 million. We feel that about 47 to 52% of all dial attempts still require multiple layers of navigation to be able to get to the prospect.
That's huge.
Huge.
And then when you then consider, well, if your SDRs or AEs were doing that, the amount of effort and expense that goes to just processing your way through that is significant.
Yeah, but here's the paradigm thinking. We only operate in a 1 to 2% connect rate because we sell to CISO. We're not even going to bother with the phone. Well, 1 to 2% connect rate in connect and sales conversation every 5 minutes on batches of about 110 dials an hour. So when you start being able to suppress the counting of irrelevant measures like dials and start focusing instead on time to conversation and can my rep execute conversation really well, that's always worth placing effort into, in my humble opinion. Some people don't agree with me on that, but that's fine. Like cold calling is probably one of the most polarizing things in the B2B sales community. For those of us who know it's not dead, that's great, but it's like we're also the same people that probably believe in Jesus by comparison to everyone else, right? So we believe and other people don't, and that's fine.
Yeah. You touched on a point there that as you optimize the number of calls that someone is going to be having through the day, then there's limited ability for them to prepare for a specific call because it's just coming through. Do you sort of advise both managers, enablement teams, sellers, to approach calls in a different way because they haven't had that prep in advance?
So we've got a massive saying over at Connect and Sell: the list is the strategy. So in a world where you might have a list that's got like a CTO, a CEO, a CRO, a COO, a head of marketing, well, those 5 job titles all require differentiated messaging to align your proposition to the problem sets that they suffer from uniquely. So me speaking to the head of marketing with a CEO level of quality or a CEO level of message structure probably won't apply to the head of marketing, so I miss the opportunity. So let's reimagine a world where your list is exclusively heads of marketing across your entire addressable market. On day 1 and day 2, your lists are exclusively the CEO, and on day 3, exclusively the COO. Why you can generally form a hypothesis about how you serve that job title and the jobs to be done within that job title. And as a result, you can formulate structured messaging which feels hyper relevant, but doesn't necessarily need to go to the extremes of being hyper personalized.
Mm.
So here's an example for connect and sell. My cold call to a CEO would be something like this. Hey, Charlie, we've never met before. Reason for my call is I'd like to share a breakthrough we've discovered recently, which is helping CEOs eliminate the nagging doubt that their go-to-market is costing them far too much money for the strategic value that they promised their investors. And I just wanted to see if it was possible to maybe get 15 to 20 minutes on your calendar next week to share this idea with you. Do you happen to have your calendar available? Versus against a CRO, which would be, hey, Charlie, we've never met. Reason for my call is I believe we've discovered a breakthrough which returns your best sellers to being able to proactively prospect using the phone in 2023. Think of it as an ability to have a conversation every 4.5 minutes as opposed to a conversation every 90 minutes. And the reason for my call was simply to see if I can get 15 to 20 minutes on your calendar next week to share this breakthrough with you. Do you happen to have your calendar available? Now, broadly speaking, they fulfill the same cadence, time promises. What's different is that I've understood the strategic, economic, and personal levels of attachment to the job to be done for each of them. And I've got unique value for both of them. And you can teach reps onto that. And you can teach reps and RevOps people how to align the data and the structure and the strategy around the data pools and stuff to feel, connect, and sell as a result. But it also means that you're now operating in a world of A/B testing and marketing and stuff that normally you'd only ever do with email. You can now apply that to cold call.
I definitely see the byproduct that if a rep is able to have consistent calls back to back, not only are you having more calls, but the calls are better because you're having 30 or 40 of them back to back. If you are having 2.5 calls a day and you don't know when those 2.5 calls are going to happen, then the reality is you're having a lot of IVR, a lot of voicemails, a lot of miss. And then when someone does actually answer, it's showtime and you haven't had that time to practice. And so just that repetition is going to improve a rep's ability to deliver that call, regardless of who they're speaking with.
And logically, you would expect that to be the case. But sometimes what I've found in 4.5 years of working at Connect and selling 2 years as a customer prior is that actually cold calling is a rarefied skill. Not everybody can be brought up to a specific level of quantity or quality. My sense is that there's probably a real elite 1% of cold callers globally who can operate regardless of constraints and system design because they're natural conversationalists and they can literally adapt and overcome in virtually all scenarios. And I don't know how you coach that. And I don't think you do coach that. I think you just unleash that. Then you've got that next strata of people who are highly effective at it and with the right enablement and systems of enablement around them, they can be consistent and committed and produce for you. And I think you've got the high call reluctant rep who sits underneath that A/B strata, which will never, no matter what tooling, enablement, psychological frameworks or support you put in front of them, will ever find it a superior experience, regardless of the fact that you've now made the job easier for them, right? And I think one of the reasons why email automation as a cockpit for reps was so successful over the past 10 to 12 years is because actually you don't have the same sort of fear response associated with sending an email. Now, the prospect might have that fight, flight, fright mechanism associated with it if it gets into the primary inbox, but you've got no way of controlling that psychology for prospects. It's completely unknown. So we kind of have a duty of care to teach on that as well when we launch our company. So, the psychology of cold calling is a big sort of infrastructural element of how we support and enable our customers. And you quickly see whether or not it's the right thing. And actually, here's a trend for you. I'm seeing more and more of my customers choose to buy Connect and Sell for one or two of their elite reps at this part of the job and not buy it for everybody else. When I first joined the company, everybody was trying to be highly democratic and share opportunity across the entire team. Now they're like, no, I've got one or two people that are reasonably good at this. I saw it in the test drive. I don't expect that to change overnight. I'm just going to place my investment and Connect and Sell them to those two superior reps.
That's very interesting. That it reminds me of that old phrase of feed the greedy, not the needy. Help your best reps get even better and use that as a carrot for others.
And it's a remarkable trend, actually. I think it's a it's a wartime trend.
Mm. If you are up for it and wanted to share your screen, maybe it'd be great to have a quick look at the tool, and maybe that will just help viewers to understand a little bit about how they can create a list and how that works in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. So by circumstance, I happen to have like our leaderboard from the past 2 days. So I typically always focus on outcome before I get to how product workflow works. But essentially, this is Connect and Sales team operating in the week before Christmas, mix of SDRs, we call them inside sales in our business, and full quota carrying reps who probably carry anywhere between $800,000 to $1.5 million quota for the business. Adam doesn't work on my team, unfortunately, because he had a game changer of a day yesterday, set 4 meetings on 29 conversations, worked 5 hours yesterday, human labor and system, and helped him navigate seamlessly through 432 dials, which for most reps would be an entire week's worth of effort. He had to do it in 5 hours. Now, this is the interesting thing, and as a RevOps exec, I think you'd probably love this sort of productivity flow and the computational element of the productivity flow, because we know as a business that if we can be anywhere plus 0.4 meetings per hour, then generally all the signs in our business are pointing to the right place for trailing revenue. But it's also a function of cost and labor, right? If I dip below that, my meetings are expensive. If I supersede my 0.4 per hour as a team, my meetings are now cheap and tolerable, even if they don't sit. So I've got this huge calibration mechanism that just comes off this ratio. And then I've got some other indicators that I care about here. I've got my dial to connect rates by rep. Poor Sean Holman, who's reasonably new to our team, had a bad day. 101 dials to a conversation. That's nearly 23 minutes. In the real world, that would be closer to probably 90 to 110 minutes of time spent to get to that one conversation. But this is much more typical, which would be a dial to conversation rate of 30 to 1, calling on revenue leaders and mid-market and enterprise. So the gap there is 454. Now, the system itself is pretty flat file. I've got 4 primary buttons that I care about. I've got my calling lists. Now, these are my calling lists, but you can see that they're fully wired to Salesforce. I don't necessarily just need to have cold calls. For example, this is a list on people that I've sent DocuSigns to that didn't become customers, or customers that churned from a while back, so I can go and do revisits. I've got missed meetings lists from an agency that I work with. I ran an experiment on psychographic list segmentation using a product called Humantic AI. I've got those lists. I've got a very specific Salesforce executive list. I've got follow-ups by priority. And then I've also got other programs that I'm involved in around private equity. So you can see that monothematic or structured list theme surfaces on page 1 of the product for us. Now, I can just pick 1 or 2 lists. I can pick 3 or 4 at a time, but normally I will pick in clusters of themes, and then I just simply load the list into the system. Now, you're about 3 button pushes away from being able to use Connect and Sell at this point. So this is essentially admin work that's helping us calibrate this calling session. So the system immediately picks up time zone signals. So if I'm in the UK, do I want to be calling PST right now? The system will help me filter for that and where in the world they are. I can also do a bit of filtering on job levels. For example, I might not want to speak to anybody at less than a manager title today. And then I've got my list settings. So the system can attempt these prospects up to 3 times per day. One of the unique functions of Connect and Sell is we rotate numbers, so that if I was to call Charlie and Charlie was in my list and I hit that threshold of 3 attempts for the day, you'd see a different number on each attempt. So it wouldn't feel like it's a spam cannon or anything like that.
Okay.
It's coming after you. If you were to call that back, it would go dead to a $40 ringtone and not actually pick up to anybody. So it's an obfuscation, but it's still highly compliant. I can also do things like set maximum number of attempts, and I can mess around with my delay between redials. Now, I'm pretty happy here. Non-callables, filtering lists for things like GDPR compliance, do not call registries, badly formed numbers, off business hours. So the density of this list is viable for now. I'm pretty satisfied that I've calibrated the broad sweeps of what I want, and I'll just wait the software second. And then I'm in my cockpit. Now you're about to hear a lady's voice. So that's the system automatically connecting me into the telephony. I choose to operate off a web browser because I've got a really high power landline connected to Ethernet system. But sometimes if I'm calling from the road, I'll dial in to connect and sell using my mobile phone, or if I'm in an overseas jurisdiction for business travel and I want to do some prospecting, I'll get connect and sell to call my phone at no charge. So I can get into the system in one of three ways. And then I've got some other feature sets. So I can pre-record a greeting, I can pre-record voicemails at one to many, and then I can choose different modes of connect and sell dependent on where I feel I am on the list. But broadly speaking, pretty happy. I can check people out, or I can dial them individually, or I can go straight to CRM. So for example, I could say Bob here emailed me yesterday. There's no reason I should call him today. And then once I'm ready to go, I simply press the sell button. Now, these green threads are the system initiating the dials. They're attempting this first column first on my behalf. And then there's humans behind this now managing. Hi there, Gerry here, calling with Connect and Sell. Alex, we've never met before. Just wanted to see if I could grab half a minute to share why I'm calling. So he hung up on me pretty much straight away. So that was a real live connect. I wasn't expecting it to connect that well for me. But you can sort of get a sense now of what that experience is. You hear the bleep in your headset. This is the real estate which opens up for you. Quick hang up was the outcome. We've got some AI now which can automatically pick up and auto dispose for you, so the rep doesn't need any cognitive load there. So you'll see that all my follow-up teleprompter and dates and so on are selected for me. And I'll just put hang up here. I've also got some other elements here. So list names, these are some qualifying questions. This is like what I care about. I can set my meeting here. I can also grab referrals. I can look at previous activity and campaign notes. And again, if I'm operating in a sort of sales engagement platform integration, like an Outreach or Sales Loft, whatever I select in this workflow on my disposition sets here, got the opportunity to trigger next actions in somebody's sequence. So you might have a voicemail sequence or a no, not me sequence, for example. And then I've got all of these other things where I can get in-call research ready to go. So for example, I can connect straight through to Alex's LinkedIn page and do my research there. And then I'm ready to move on to my next call. And Connect Themselves going to push on for me.
Yeah.
And then lastly, this is probably one of the most interesting things for your first or second line leadership, which is what I call the active sales floor. So I can now go in,
agent logged in
for the day. I can log back in, and then I can see who's in active conversations. And now start listening to those conversations that my reps are having in real time as those conversations connect. And then I've got the opportunity to listen and isolate Paul, for example. I can barge into the conversation if Paul's doing something ridiculous, which hardly ever happens in the real world. And then lastly, I can do post-call or in-call whisper to my rep as they're in the conversation. Sort of think of it like a two-way channel in the same way that a DJ's listening to a beat come in.
Yeah.
But the bit there is that the prospect never gets to hear. So that is the simplicity and elegance of Connect. We have a new UX refresh coming down in January, so we've all been testing that. So it's going to be radically overhauling some of those workflow imagery, but you know that's it. Connect to a CRM, load the list as a report, press the sell button, human labor and system work together, and then you're knifed into a conversation on average every 4.5 minutes.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks for giving us the tour through that with the live demo. That's fantastic. And like you said earlier, the list is the strategy, helping to define how you create a list, making sure that reps have got the right list in front of them. That's the heavy lifting up front.
Yeah.
And then it's just serving
I've
them
got
up
a personal belief there. I don't think that sales reps are brilliant analysts, especially at top of funnel or early career reps. So, you know, I'd put more emphasis on an additional line in a RevOps org around list building specifically, an expert list builder to use all of your list building resources, build those lists for those reps so that the reps don't have to worry about it. So I think that's cost savings.
Exactly. List building, enriching the data, making sure that it's all there ready to go, and then just serving up calls for the team. But Gerry, thank you so much for that. So what's the best way of people getting in touch with you or with Connect and Sell if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. My profile's reasonably easy to find. My phone number for anybody that might want to call me is 07702 034081. My email address is gerry.hillock.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining the channel today. It's been hugely insightful. And I think for me and the clients that I'm working with, this whole conversation about outbound, the balance between email and AI, and then human connections over telephone is becoming ever more important over these coming years. So thanks very much for joining the channel, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.
Brilliant.